Hello, and we are live. It is May. Well, it's the end of May. We're nearly in June. How is that happening? Hi to Tyler, who's coming from Houston. People coming in from all over the world. Cara, also coming in from Houston. We've got Ray from Vancouver. We've got such a great subject for you today. We've got Stephanie coming in from good old Philly. Marie from, again, what's it with Houston today? We've got so many people coming in from Houston. Mary, our old friend Mary from Atlanta. So we are talking about relocating partners, and the key, well, let's face it, relocating partners is the key to relocation success. And we are super excited. We have with us, we have Erin Gough from Reckitt. We've got Christelle from SLB, and we've got McKell from NetExpat. Really important subject, and we've got some tremendous speakers as we're talking about the importance of relocating the partners and making the partner experience, the employee experience, the family experience so key to making the relocation itself successful. But you know how it is, everybody. Please join in the conversation, write in the comments box, tell us who you are, where you are. I see people are coming in from all over the world, which is absolutely fantastic. Now, I know a lot of you want to get your CPE credits, and we have loads and loads of CPE credits. So if you want your credits from Worldwide ERC, your GMS or your CRP credits, they're up there. If you want HRCI credits or SHRM credits, then many thanks to our good friends at Reckitt Mortgage. They are also there. So a lot of people want those credits. If you want those credits, then please just jot down the relevant code as it comes along the screen. I'll leave that for a bit, or get your camera out and take a bit of a photo, or do a screenshot, or whatever you want, but just make sure you get that code if you want it. Now, next week, we've got a really important show for you. We're going to be talking about, well, we're going to be announcing a whole new mobility blueprint, a new way of doing mobility. So in the past, we've talked about assignment management services, we've talked about assignment management technology, we've talked about relocation management companies. What about if the whole thing started coming together with a whole new paradigm for running our industry? Well, that is what we're going to share with you on the show next week, and I think you will find that really quite fascinating. So if you want to join us next week, then just tune in. We'll be there same time next week, and we're going to be announcing a new mobility blueprint. So how exciting is that? Talking of exciting, what's been happening in the last 7 days in the wonderful world of global mobility? Well, there's only one way really to find out, which is to watch this show and to find out what's been going on, what's the breaking news, what's been happening in the wonderful world of global mobility over the last 7 days. Let's find out. So congratulations to everybody who's been promoted, everyone who's got a new job, and a special congratulations to all the Emma winners. And, well, especially let's give a big shout out to Krista Caldwell for winning Global Mobility Professional of the Year, and especially to my dear friend Kathy Hine for winning Outstanding Contribution to Global Mobility. Now, Kathy and Michael Cadden, who I know is also in the audience, have run FEM's New York chapter pretty much since the day that I launched the Forum for Expatriate Management back in, I think it was 2008 or so. So they worked tirelessly to promote FEM and indeed global mobility for the last 15 years. So many thanks to them for all their work that they've done. And as I must say, Kathy, that outstanding contribution award for you is so very well deserved. So everybody hit the heart button, hit the like button, hit the applause button, and let's say congratulations to Krista, congratulations to Kathy Hine, and congratulations to everybody else who's won an Emma Award just the other day out in Dallas. So that's all the breaking news we've had. We're now going to be moving on to be talking about our immigration update. So let's run that video and let's bring onto stage the one and only Julia Onslow Cole.
Hi, Brian.
Hey, Julia, how are you doing?
Really well, thanks.
Okay, and you're back from your travels, I believe.
Yes, I am. I got back last night. Yeah.
Cool. So what are you going to talk to us about today?
So I'm going to talk about China, and then it's super exciting that, you know, we have so many people talking today about dependent rights. So I was going to touch on that as well. We haven't covered China for a while, and I just wanted to say a few things about what's happening economic in China, because their exports have really started to pick up. And as everyone knows, there was a prolonged property slump and also flagging consumption and a much slower economic growth. And, you know, really what we are seeing now in China is all of this slowly picking up. And even though we know that there are all these reports, and there's some great trade reports actually out last week about the shift from globalization to regional policies and the protectionism that we're seeing, particularly in the US. And in fact, Biden put some more tariffs on China products only last week. The case with Europe's slightly different, and Europe really can't afford to sort of adapt such a protectionist policy. And in fact, you know, if you actually look and see what's happening in China, the leaders of Germany and France, they've both met with the president of China very recently. They went in April and May. And in the UK trade minister actually said that it was profoundly in the UK's interest to engage with China. So I just wanted to say this as a bit of a geopolitical backdrop, because you can see why there's a lot of people going into China. And I managed to get through Becky Shear the very latest figures on this. So the Immigration Administrative Authority's latest figures show 13.074 million foreign nationals entered or exited China this year. And that's over 300% more than last year. So that's the backdrop. And against this, China is really trying hard to make things a bit easier for people visiting. So there's a lot of things that are going on with mainland Chinese nationals who want to go to Macau and Hong Kong. So there's a whole raft of things that are going on there. But for people that are coming in from outside China, for foreign nationals, there's a lot of really positive things that you may not know about, but it's important to be aware of. So the first is, which is quite extraordinary, is if you're a foreign national and you can't get a visa before you want to go to mainland China, it might be possible now to get one on arrival. So there are documents that you need. It is something that you need to look at in advance. But if you had someone you wanted to send really quickly on a trip, that would be worth looking into. The other thing is that if you are transiting through China, then you no longer have to go through a whole inspection process, which is, again, makes things so much easier for travelers. And then foreign travelers, foreign nationals who are already in mainland China, they can apply for multi-entry visa if they show that that's necessary. And then hot off the press is you'll soon get an announcement that if you're a foreign national already in China, you might be able to get an extension within the country. So again, very positive. And also documentary evidence that is normally required for a Chinese visa is actually a lot lower than it was, because China's now reaching out to all the different departments to get the licenses and other information, and it can do that in their own ecosystem. So the overall message on China is that, we've seen this, it is sort of growing. It is of relevance. Obviously, it's of relevance, but, we are seeing a high pickup in people traveling there. But just to come back finally on the point of partners, if you're a spouse, you can get a dependent visa, but you can work. The only work that you could probably safely do is charitable work, but otherwise you can't do that. And if you're not married, then you cannot even get a dependent visa. So what people do is they get a student visa or another type of visa. And I'm sure Helen Frew is tuning in today from Permits, and just a big shout out because Christine's on our board too, and we've got the Permits conference very excitedly next week. So you've got a chance to buy your ticket up until Thursday. But China is one of the things, one of the sponsors continually raise, and it's one of the countries that we continually keep under review.
Okay, so what's Michael Cadmus? He said over the past year or so, the number of people accessing China via the living abroad has dropped dramatically from the top 5 to closer to 50. That's quite interesting, isn't it?
Yeah.
So yeah.
Thank you, Michael. That's very interesting.
Yeah, that's it's pretty good evidence that something's going on there. Yeah. Okay, so Julia, thank you so much. And also, once again, to just promote Permits Foundation, great organization, and good luck with that conference next week. We're now going to move on to talk about tax, and super excited that we've got Julie Barron and we've also got Dan Trin from Vialta Partner who are going to be joining us. So everybody, you know how it works. Please hit the heart button, hit the like button, hit the applause button. Let's say a big thank you to Julia Onslow-Cole, and let's run the video, and we'll welcome onto our stage Julie Barron and Dan Trin.
Hello, Brian.
Hey, Julie, Dan, good to see you both. So we're not doing China, we're going thousands of miles away. Julia, what are we talking about today?
So today, Dan is going to share some not so great news out of Canada about some increases in capital gains taxes there. So over to you, Dan.
Yeah. Give us the bad news, Dan.
Thanks, Brian. Thanks, Julie. So as Julie mentioned, I'm very excited to be here today to share some recent news out of Canada about changes to our capital gains inclusion rates that were announced in the 2024 federal budget. Some people might say I need to get a life, but that's okay. As a bit of background, since the year 2001, when a taxpayer in Canada sells a capital asset, only 50% of the gain is included in the taxpayer's income. And this is what we commonly refer to as the capital gains inclusion rate. And what it does is it provides a favorable tax treatment to the sale of capital assets. But the bad news is on April 16th of this year, our finance minister proposed to increase the inclusion rate from 50% to 66.7% for capital gains realized on or after June 25th. So about a month away. The new inclusion rate will only apply on capital gains that exceed a combined $250,000 capital gains and stock option income threshold. So what does this mean from a mobility perspective? Basically, it means employees on assignment in Canada could be subject to a higher tax rate on the sale of their personal investment assets. It also means employees who cease Canadian residency after June 25th as a result of an international assignment or a relocation may be subject to departure tax at the higher inclusion rates. So this could result in a much higher tax burden for employees, and in some cases, the employer. So I know I briefly mentioned stock options, and this is because the proposals also adjust the taxation of stock option income in Canada.
Guessing that's not favorable either.
No, yeah. So they're aligning the treatment to align with the changes to the capital gains. Right. So currently, qualified stock options receive favorable tax treatment in Canada by way of a 50% deduction. But the 2024 budget proposes to reduce that stock option deduction to 33.3% for taxpayers who exceed the combined $250,000 threshold. So what this means, Brian and Julie, is the newest change to the stock option deduction rate adds to an already complex set of rules in Canada around stock options. So many plan administrators who are still dealing with the introduction of the $200,000 stock option annual vesting limit that was introduced and took effect in 2021. But now the new changes increase the administrative burden and further reduces any benefit received on the exercise of their qualified stock options. So a common question that I get is, Dan, where do we stand with the enactment of the new rules? The Minister of Finance announced that they'll introduce the legislation before Parliament breaks for the summer, which is generally in July and August. So the legislation then needs to be passed through the House and the Senate and receive royal assent. So there's still a lot of work to do before it officially becomes law. But the expectation is that the rules would apply retroactively to the June 25th effective date. So for employers, many questions remain about what rate they'll be required to withhold on the stock option income. Can they withhold assuming the full 50% deduction, or will they be required to withhold based on a more conservative approach? The expectation is that the draft legislation that will come out shortly will answer this and many other questions. So finally, from a policy perspective, these proposed changes are a good reason to revisit Canadian assignment policy, particularly around tax equalization. The policy should clearly define who bears the responsibility of certain tax items on equity income, investment income, and departure tax, for example. And further to that, who will get the benefit of the lower rates on the first $250,000 of capital gains and stock option income. So as you can see, lots to consider, but there's still lots unknown. So if you're looking for more information on the proposed changes, I do invite you to join us for our Relocating Partners webinar on June 11th. A little plug there, Brian, for our webinar. By then we hope to have more details on the rule changes that we can share with you. So that's all from me.
Okay, well, thank you so much. That was really quite illuminating. I see some light bulbs going up on the screen there. So really helpful, and we really appreciate your time to share this pretty important. Well, it's important if you have a Canadian tax connection. This really important news update. So we're now going to move on to our main subject, which is relocating partners and why that's so important to a successful relocation. I'm super excited that we've got with us Christelle Labbe, we've got Erin Gough, and we've got Des McKell. So everybody, hit the heart button, hit the like button, hit the applause button. So a big, big thank you to Julie and to Dan, and welcome onto our stage, Des, Christelle, and Erin. Welcome to the show. So we've got Erin Gough from Reckitt, we've got Christelle Labbe from Shlumberger as was, and we've got Des McKell from NetExpat. let me just start, actually, and it's very remiss of me, Des. We were celebrating all those Emma wins earlier, and of course you guys have done well. So tell us about your wins in Dallas the other night.
Thank you, Brian. Yeah, it was a great event, great evening. I was saying to my team colleagues today on our regular weekly call, I just got to turn up and have a nice dinner and pick up the awards. It was really all down to the team. But yes, we won a couple of awards, one of them in the well-being category, which I think is incredibly relevant for today's conversation. The other in technology for our Culture Snap cultural self-assessment tool. So yeah, wonderful event. It was great to see a lot of old faces, and yeah, thank you for the congrats. Appreciate it.
Okay, so let's move on. We're going to be talking about relocating partners, but before we do, let's just get the intros done. So we'll start with you, Erin, if we may. Tell us a bit about yourself and about mobility at Reckitt. So a bit of scene setting here.
So I'm with Reckitt. I've been with Reckitt for about 14 years. If you don't know who Reckitt is, I know you know our products, Lysol, Durex, Finish. And we have an international transferee program. Currently, it's about 650 transferees that, although they are permanent in that we don't do a home host, we don't support tax equalization. They go in the local structure. We move them we move 250 or so every year. So they do get tapped on the shoulder to continually move around. So it's a bit disruptive. But it's great for their career growth and of course for Reckitt as well.
Cool. And you're based out of Chicago, aren't you?
Yes, I am Chicago, but we are a UK headquartered company. Right.
Okay. And Christelle, you're with SLB. Tell us about I keep saying Shlumberger. I know it's SLB now, but tell us about SLB.
Yes, thank you, Brian. So indeed, we are called SLB now for a year and a half. And for those who don't know us, previously called Shlumberger, but we are a global technology company and, many driving innovations in the energy sector. So a very global organization, multinational, over 120 countries. And I have been with this company for, I will not count, but over 20 years in different pillars of the HR function. So our mobility programs in SLB are quite large in numbers. We do move around, about 2,000 people and families every year. And we have globally over 7,000 assignees anywhere at any point in time. A little bit similarly to what Reckitt does, we also move our employees sort of permanently to a location, or at least for a period of 3 to 5 years, and for the majority on the local payroll. So not the traditional tax equalization scheme either. So similarities to you, Erin.
And your role, Christelle, is broader than mobility, isn't it? Tell us about your role at SLB.
Yeah, so interestingly, SLB does not necessarily have a wide global mobility organization at all. Our assignments, international assignments and moves are actually driven by our talent managers in everywhere in the world, in all our divisions, and by the local HR team. So I myself in charge of all HR services, basically in the UK, and so services like relocation, tax assistance, etc., will be under our shared services team. And whilst we manage some of our policies globally, but with it's a global mix hybrid of global and local supports, basically, for the actual move of our.
So really, that's a very fascinating way of doing it. So mobility is so embedded in talent that it doesn't actually exist as a separate function, and you've got 7,000 people on transfer or assignment or whatever we call it, but 7,000 people out of country. And it's just all embedded within mobility, which is, yeah, I mean, we always talk about the link between mobility and talent. And in your case, it's just completely as one, it's completely integrated. So that's a whole other subject, but quite fascinating. Now, one question I'd like to engage with our audience, if I may. It's a question I asked on LinkedIn earlier in the week. And the question was this: how good is your company, or if you're a service provider, think of your major client, how good is your company or your client at supporting the partners and families of your transferees? So that's the question. How good is your company at supporting the partners and families of your transferees? And I'll give you 4 choices. So you can either say, we're pretty weak, or you could say, nah, we're okay, or you could say that we're pretty good or first rate. So basically got 4 choices: weak, okay, good, first rate. So I'd be interested to know what you in the audience think about how you are handling the programs. Des, I mean, what are you seeing from an industry-wide perspective? How would you say, most companies are, to be brutally honest, in terms of supporting the families?
Great question. I would like to be positive by saying it's getting better, right? So if we'd had this conversation 5 years ago, and I know we'll talk a little bit about our original survey that we conducted with EY, the results were pretty poor. But there's definitely signs of improvement. Employers will always think they're doing a somewhat better job than employees feel at the sharp end. So again, we continue to see a bit of a delta between how well employees think that they're being treated and their families are being treated and versus the employer. But it's definitely on a trajectory of improvement. And I think some of that, Brian, is post-pandemic. I think there's clearly much more focus on well-being, duty of care. We were talking a little bit about this earlier. And really just, what kind of support do you now wrap around a family in terms of encouraging them to move, but also stay for the long term. So it's heading in the right direction.
Okay, so we've got the results of the survey. So just to let you know, I'll just put it up here. What we found was that 24% of respondents said that it was pretty weak or poor. 26% put it in the okay category. So in total, that's 50% said it was okay, either okay-ish or poor. And then another 38% actually thought they were doing a pretty good job. On 12%, maybe it's only 12%, said it's a top priority, it's first rate. So it was actually fairly evenly split between companies who were going all the way from weak, which was whatever, close on a quarter, to actually it's first rate. Now, Christelle and Erin, your companies, I think, who focus more than somewhat on that. So tell us a bit about how you focus on the family in your relocations. Erin, do you want to sort of shoot for that first?
Sure. I mean, our program is, as I mentioned, it is local to local. So the expectation is that our transferees, are contributing to their own housing and paying their own taxes, and they're fitting into the local structure. So it is a lot on them. What we do offer is the health care and the pension and the home leave and the schooling and the things that are still really important to the family. And that is also the family support. And the cultural immersion. We looked at, what else can we do for the family? The spouse may not be able to work in the new location. What else can we do? What else do they want to do? So we looked at, adding additional support, such as, career alternatives. We really looked at, how else can we help make the family happy and settle in? And that we did that with working with Des.
Okay, and Christelle, what about your experience at SLB?
I think it's for us, one of the key element is actually the planning. ahead of even presenting an offer to move internationally. So one part, I mean, we are a very system-driven company and company of engineers, so we like to have systems. And we use that as well to actually collect feedback and preferences from our employees in terms of what are their requirements, what are their constraints or needs from a family point of view, schooling needs, or partner wanting to move with them. It might be a partner that we don't know of because they're not married or they are not, in our system. But it's very important that we understand that by moving that employee, we are also, basically asking us the other half to also consider the whole move. So it's embedded into our career portal where employees can express their needs and preferences, one thing that we need to probably do better is make sure that we take that into consideration, because sometimes, of course, you have business needs that don't necessarily align with that, but it's crucial to the initial step prior to even presenting an offer of job. And I think one common element, and I was just seeing on the chat a reference to this term we used to use as trailing spouse. We did discuss that this is a concept that really, does not necessarily exist anymore, because first, it may not be a spouse, maybe a partner, it may be someone it may be a man, a woman, basically the demographics of people moving has completely changed. And that is also one very important part, is that the other half, in most cases, is someone who has a career and wants to continue working. And that is one aspect that we are focusing on, and maybe we can talk about that a bit later. But this is where Permits Foundation, for instance, helps, and we SLB supports from the very beginning this non-profit organization, Permits Foundations, to basically improve work permit regulation in many countries. And why is it important? Because more than we actually have those statistics in a survey that more than 80%, 88% of partners actually are highly educated, have a bachelor, master, PhD, and actually more than 80% we found were working prior to moving. So the indication is that they also expect to be able to continue that, and that is hugely different to 20 years ago, maybe.
And I'll bring Des into the conversation at that point, because you're touching on this whole question of the dual income family, and I'm sure that these days a dual income is not a luxury. You need a dual income to survive.
Absolutely.
So tell us a bit about what companies are doing to support moves where, all moves are important, but especially moves where the dual income is so critical.
Yeah, for sure. And I think the point you make about all moves are important. I know we'll circle back to that from an inclusivity and equity point of view, but yeah, our own statistics really correlate with Christelle. We know that the working demographic today is more highly educated than ever before. When you look at Gen Y, 90% of those partners have a career at the point that they're making a decision to relocate with your employee. Okay, so highly educated, have a career, want to work. But from a financial perspective, Brian, you touched on this. We also know that almost 75% of those families state that maintaining that dual career is a significant or critical component of their decision making. So if you just let all of those statistics sink in for a moment, you've got this incredibly well educated, professionally active demographic who need a dual income. It's not a choice anymore. They have bills to pay. They have a lifestyle to maintain. So when you put all of those factors together, and linking it to the wider talent conversation in terms of how do we encourage our talent that's already within the business, but also from a new hire perspective, how do we encourage mobility with those individuals, you really have to be taking consideration of the whole family. As Christelle says, not just the employee. It's fundamentally important for a future policy.
So let's look at this slide, because I know you've done. Well, actually, tell us a bit about the survey. Then we'll go into that slide. So, Des, just tell us about the survey that NetExpat has done, and give us the background. Then we'll just go into that slide about family rejection.
So the context, I mean, we've known for over 2 decades that partners are the key to relocation success, but really we wanted to pressure test that theory with corporates and with families. So we partnered with our good friends from EY. This was originally back in 2018. We continue to update the report every 18 to 24 months. The latest iteration is 2023. The single biggest piece of research on the topic of relocating partners, we had over 3,500 respondents, but crucially, Brian, over 1,000 voices of relocating partners. So this really got to the heart of the sentiment and the reality. And unfortunately, it continues to validate that partners are the single biggest reason why families reject the opportunity of a relocation, and also why moves fail. And if you can figure out those 2 components, then you're certainly on the way to improving your overall talent strategy. So, yeah, I think this is, when we start looking at the reasons for failed assignments, we're kind of skipping forward in the journey here. But you can see that the partner's poor well-being and unhappiness completely outranks every other contributing factor to a failure. And when you think of failure, I don't know whether we can go back to the failure slide, but failure has got many faces. Failure is not necessarily the family getting back on the plane and going home. The family could simply be completely disconnected. The employee is distracted at work, is not being productive. I mean, these are all elements of failure. And I think the challenge for many organizations is, how do you measure some of these things as well? So I know we're sort of getting into other conversation topic there, but getting a handle and an accurate handle on what is failure, I think again is something that really can be quite a challenge. But the partner, as you see there, the number one significant reason.
So we all know, I think, that an unhappy family is the most common cause of assignment failure, and as you highlighted there, of course, an unhappy family is also the most common cause of assignment rejection, which I think is data that people have tended to look at a bit less. But what can we do about it? So, Christelle, tell us a bit about what you guys do at SLB, because I think there's some pretty pioneering stuff that you're doing to ensure that the family has a good, we talk about employee experience, but has a good family experience.
Yeah, surely. I think beyond the more traditional benefits, the support that we provide in terms of the actual physical relocation, etc. It's also about creating the right environment, the right network to support those employees and dependents moving. So one particular thing we have, and that existed for over 2 decades, I think, in SLB is this what we call this spouse association. It used to be called. I know we should surely rename it, but basically it is an extremely powerful network of our own employees' families in the location, who are basically volunteering to help and share information to arriving families. So there's like a welcome and getting to know the area, helping. I mean, it's a very informal, but it's a great complement, I would say, to what the relocation service would provide already in terms of initial discovery of the new city or the new country. But of course, there is the other supports which are very important in terms of helping the spouse or partner to look for a job, or maybe retraining, which could be another option depending on what they want to do as part of the next chapter move. So that's where we obviously use services of NetExpat for that, and that is a great service that helps, because what we found again is that work for the partner to work in the other location is a key component of the success of the move. I would just share one more statistic of the other survey, Foundation, which was that 56% of the partners that responded said that not working in the new location had a negative impact on their mental health. So it goes back to what you were saying earlier, Des, about the well-being and the wider equilibrium balance that they need to find in a new location. Yeah.
Okay, so bringing Erin into the conversation, I should say we've mentioned NetExpat. They are a great supply partner of Benevo on our tech platform, and we know how much companies do appreciate the support that can be given. So Erin, tell us a bit about Reckitt and what you guys do to support the family.
So our program offers repatriation assistance to anyone who wants to return home within the first 6 months if they're unhappy. But that's a really expensive move, without trying something else first. And that's what got us thinking, what else can we do? So, maybe the spouse or partner is unable to work in the new location. Their education or credentials may not carry over. And that's what had us thinking about offering the career alternative or life coaching. I saw in the comments, Richard Majewski, I believe, asked about, what if the partner wants to set up their own business? Well, this is, their time to do that, and they can get assistance with looking into how to do that. And then we also looked into, next was adding social integration support. So maybe they're just going to take a career break and they, want to pick up hobbies or just find a way to really make friends and immerse themselves in this new country and this new culture. How are they going to do that? Where are they going to meet people and join clubs? So we joined up with NetExpat, again, on introducing those services. This is, they're really great things to add from an employee experience perspective, but it's also really a relatively inexpensive insurance policy, I guess, to try and avoid a failed assignment, because it really helps to keep the employee focused on their job and happy and not worried about the partner or family at home that's unhappy.
So tell us about some of the downsides of an unhappy family. I mean, obviously we know that's a big cause of assignment failure, but what are some of the other issues? I'm thinking here, duty of care and mental health. And I mean, what have been your experiences on that? Maybe Christelle first, if you want to sort of feed on your thoughts about, what are the downsides of it's a pretty obvious question, I suppose, in a way, but the downsides of an unhappy family.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, it's so clearly, if the partner, spouse is unhappy, the entire household is unhappy, and of course the employee is not able to focus on the job. Their mind is somewhere else, trying to sort out home problem or children schooling issues, etc. So it's so important to get it right at the beginning of this, especially of an assignment, because we know this is it's a daunting task, right? To move somewhere that you don't know usually. There's a lot of unknown. So as much as we can, basically to break down that unknown and plan. I go back to the planning because I think that's really what sometimes makes it fail from the very beginning. But sometimes you plan well and things go wrong in the middle of an assignment, and this is where we have to be also listening to what's happening with our employees and be able to support. So I think the wider company's mechanism in place, be it employee assistance program, well-being programs are there to help. They are, by the way, accessible to family members. So they are also there to support with personal matters that sometimes come up during assignment. But it's very obvious for the company, an unhappy partner creates a troubled employee who will not be at their best at work. So that's very clear. Yeah.
One of the things I've seen apocryphally, and I'd be interested, Des, whether this is supported by your data, is that when you have an unhappy family or an unhappy partner, maybe a non-working partner, before it gets to the big head of saying we want to go back home, there's like stages before that. And one of the stages before that is they might sort of pin their unhappiness on something else. So they're more likely to say, I don't like the apartment or the house we're living in or the area we're living in. And they end up causing issues for the corporate because they're taking out what might be a bigger unhappiness on, if you like, the things that are literally close to the home, i.e. where they're living or the furniture or things like that. Is that something that you've seen in your data?
Not specifically in the data, Brian. I think you're probably right, and I'm sure that Erin and Christelle and probably a lot of the corporates on this call would attest to that. It's kind of putting off the inevitable. If you're not going to try and help to resolve that, I mean, clearly we'd prefer to be at the front end, avoiding that problem in the first case, but you really have to be resolving that pretty quickly. I had a call not that long ago with another corporate mobility leader, and they shared very openly and very confidentially that they had literally found a partner marooned in a service department somewhere in Texas, and the employee, she in this case didn't drive, had no network, and was at the point of getting on the plane and coming home. I mean, that's a terrible situation. You're literally just putting your talent at risk. You're putting at risk the opportunity of keeping that talent long term. So all of these things will bubble to the surface, but you really want to be avoiding that, by providing this support at the front end. I think that's the simple solution here.
And Erin, do you want to come in on that?
Yeah, I just wanted to add that, these services for the transferee and for their families are offered, at the onset, but it's often very stressful. There's a lot coming at our transferee and family who is moving right at the onset. And we had found, what was the acceptance rate of the services being offered to them. And we found if we really took the time to make sure they all got connected to Des, where Des could explain properly what the services was, so they knew what they were getting, they were much more interested in accepting those services and getting the value from it. So we had much better response rate by kind of forcing that connection and having Des explain the services instead of having our RMC say, you're eligible for this service, would you like it? Yes, no, because they don't know what they don't know. So by making sure they get the full explanation of what this is being offered to them, what support services they can get, we've had a much better response rate.
Okay, I mean, let's do it. There's a comment here from Carol that I just want to bring up. She says there's a lot to unpack here. Let's just pull that one up. There's a lot to unpack here with culture, gender roles, etc. So, I mean, let's try and unpack some of that. I mean, to what extent does it depend on culture and gender, or to what extent is this a universal problem?
I mean, for me, Brian, I think everybody, at a human level, regardless of gender, regardless of culture, regardless of the combination of departure and destination, if you're an organization that really wants to take care of your talent and the wider family, fundamentally, it's about offering support. The support will be different for every individual. No individual, no relocating partner has the same needs. So I think to Erin's point, it's about creating a program of support that will really meet them where they're at and ensure that you do have that support, whether they're working, whether they're looking to create self-employment, whether they want to take some time out, pursue some hobbies, volunteering, ensuring that you have a blended and flexible approach to be able to do that. So I think it's a really important point that Carol makes. and to be mindful of that. But nevertheless, I think there's definitely support that can be provided to everybody. The only other point I wanted to quickly make, Brian, was around the transformation away from cash to care. So this is another significant shift that we've seen.
I've heard people talking about care flex rather than core flex.
We love that. Yeah, I
So
think.
tell us a bit about that, about care flex and about the importance of care.
Yeah, I think again, post-pandemic, there has been this shift away, and again, there's a lot of great data in the survey. I think only 36% of organizations now, compared to over 60, are offering cash as family support, partner support, as part of their policies. So we applaud that. Moving away from cash, moving to managed support. To Erin's point, it's often even better value for money. So makes perfect sense in that sense. The move to CareFlex away from CoreFlex, I think, is long overdue. We were hearing from a lot of our clients that moving to a very binary CoreFlex approach was really forcing families to make some very difficult decisions out of their flexible benefits. And typically, everything that was lumped into the core bucket would be tax briefing, get your visa, things that were taking care of the employer, not really taking care of the family. So we're encouraging organizations to look at a version 2.0 to say, just move some of that family support to the left-hand side of the equation, give the family a little bit of help in that left-hand bucket, and allow them to top it up, right? Allow them to top it up out of their flexible benefits if that's what they want to do. But avoid them having to make tough decisions, and avoid them having to make, as many decisions, full stop. Make sure there's a little bit of support there for the family. So we're branding it CareFlex. We've had a couple of clients now move in that direction to really boost the overall family experience. And I think that's, again, probably the direction of travel. Okay,
I want to move on to a tangential, well, it's not tangential, but a segue into a second area, which is about diversity, equity, and inclusion, which obviously is something that is dear to pretty much everybody's heart in the broader HR at the corporate level, and going down, of course, into mobility. But what is the link between DE&I and Relocating Partners? I mean, and how do the two, Christelle, what's been your experience of how those two areas link together?
I mean, clearly, again, back to the evolution of the profile of our workforce, right? If 20 years ago, the trailing spouse was, in probably 80% of the cases, a woman, in today's world, it's very different. And if we want to better, to improve diversity if we start by gender diversity, we need to be more flexible and supportive to allow those dual career situations to continue. Otherwise, it is definitely an obstacle to accepting any move. But if I may mention as well, I think the aspect of situations with same-sex partners as well. I think it is an area where we are focusing more and more attention to ensure that our policies are inclusive of the situation, and also that we look at for instance, the countries where you can work as a same-sex partner, or you could access work. That is actually another great tool of Paris Foundation, which is the world map showing you which countries do allow this. And we've realized that even our HR function was not necessarily, we can't be knowledgeable about every single country in the world, and we move people globally. So we need those type of tools to facilitate and ensure that our talent mobility is actually catering for all and inclusive.
Okay, and let's look at this really from an outcome point of view, because supporting the family is, we all know, a good thing to do, but equally our employers quite often want to see data, and they want to see what the outcome is. So, and I'll address this one to you, if I may, Erin. How do you find that supporting partners delivers a better outcome And I suppose in particular, I'm looking at productivity on assignment and long-term talent retention.
Well, I'll never forget the transferee who said, that they were having issues because, they were hearing the complaints at home and they needed to make the happy wife so they could have the happy life. Now it's happy partner. But, that
language has changed, hasn't it? Language has changed over
yes,
the
yes. And we don't want to hear that. We don't ever want to hear that the transferee is having issues at home. So it's about making sure that we have all the support services in place and being offered for them to accept, so that the family can get settled. But because we tap them on the shoulder and ask them to move, it could be 18 months, it could be 4 years. That's disruptive as well. So are we giving them the programs in place to help them when they have to pick up suddenly and move again?
Okay. And we've got just a few minutes left, but to sort of bring things together, I mean, there's an area which we haven't touched upon, and I think it's quite an important one, and probably especially in some of the areas, Christelle, where SLB operates, remote areas offshore, and that's this question of split family assignments. So where only one member, only the employees move in, and the spouse and maybe the family are staying back home. Tell us about how you manage split family assignments.
Yeah, sure. First, I would start to say that we don't, as a company, encourage split families unless there's no other way around, because, as you said, the location, due to our field operations, for instance, offshore, etc., does not allow the family, the employee, to be accompanied, right? So that's what we call non-accompanied or single status. And what's important in those situations is actually more the frequency at which the employee can go back home, and being able to respect this schedule and this rotation, which of course is not always easy to fix in advance in a very dynamic operation as it can be in the energy sector. But it is one of the key things we are trying to improve on, which is having regular schedules and allowing, obviously, the person to know in advance and plan in advance when they can be home. But again, that is only really in very specific circumstances and specific jobs. For the rest of our assignees, we are definitely encouraging families to move together and do everything to do that.
So you're encouraging families to move together. We've only got a minute and a half left. So very quickly, Erin, I know at Reckitt, I think you were saying to me earlier that you actually say it is mandatory to move with the family. Is that correct?
Well, it's written in our policy that the family moves together. So split transfers, are not encouraged. That's not to say they don't happen, but they, may be temporary in nature because of the school schedule. You can't move mid-year. So we support where we can. But we also offer the social integration services for the employee who has transferred alone, whether they either don't have a family, thinking from the diversity and inclusion perspective, or if they have transferred without their family. We do have that social integration services that is also offered to that employee who may not have the ability to make the connection with friends outside of work.
Okay, well, we're coming very much to the end of our 60 minutes. So I'm going to bring back onto stage. We've got our immigration guru, Julie Onslow-Cole. We've got Julie Barron from Vialto. We've got Dan Trin, our Canadian expert from Vialto, and of course, our wonderful producer, Tally. I just want to say to everybody, we're back next week when we're going to be talking about the new global mobility blueprint. That's a really, really important area, and we really would encourage you to join us next week. It's been an amazing show this week. Thank you so much to our guests. Thank you so much to Julie and to Dan. Thank you so much to Julia from Fragaman, and a big thank you to our special guests, Des McKell from NetExpat, Christelle Labbe from SLB, Erin Gough from Reckitt, and of course to our wonderful producer, Tally Gorin. I'm Brian Friedman. This has been The View from the Top. Hope you all have a great week, and we'll see you again this time next week. Take care, everybody, and thank you for tuning in. Goodbye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye. Thanks, everyone.